The ugly young man was shot dead and reincarnated into a magical world. He unlocked his class's powers after saving a girl. Luciel, a young man with no direction in life, was cast aside by society. Each day, he walked under the blistering 30-degree sun, searching for a job that paid a mere $5 million a month. Yet, his unconventional looks left him unwanted by every company. One fateful evening, he finally found work, after promising to clean the restroom at his new job. As he walked home, chest puffed with pride, a thief emerged from a shop. The young man began to run, but fate had other plans. The thief, an American, fired his weapon, and in a tragic twist, an innocent bystander was caught in the crossfire. Luciel. Clutching his chest, he crumbled to the ground, thinking of all he had sacrificed for a life that ultimately meant nothing. As darkness enveloped him, he suddenly heard the voice of a divine being. Impressed by the action he had displayed in the restroom, the deity offered Luciel a second chance in a fantastical realm filled with magic and monsters. When he opened his eyes, he found himself alone in a vast open field. Looking up, he was met with the sight of a colossal red dragon soaring above him. Springing to his feet, he checked his stats and realized life here was akin to a video game. He was assigned the role of a healer, a fitting class for someone too timid to face battles head-on. As he rummaged through his pockets, he discovered a few coins he had collected from the restroom the day before. Determined to earn a living the right way in this new world, he set off, only to trip over the corpse of a slain monster. Terrified, he bolted away. After walking for a while, he arrived at the gates of a city guarded by soldiers. He quickly realized that anyone entering the city needed to present identification or pay off the guards. Unfortunately, Luciel had nothing on him. The guards summoned him to show his papers, but Luciel spun an elaborate tale, claiming he grew up in the forest as a healer, only to be cast out from his clan for his hideous appearance. One guard rolled his eyes, urging him to stop lying and just get inside. At that moment, a strong, independent girl named Lumina glanced at Luciel's ugly face and ordered him to hurry inside. The kind guard warned her that this guy liked to play alpha in relationships, but Luciel paid no heed and dashed after her. Suddenly, he collided with 3 adventurers, tumbling to the ground. They glared at him, demanding to know who he was. Luciel introduced himself as a healer. The adventurers initially seemed hostile, dismissing healers, but softened after Luciel flashed a shy smile. Lumina stepped forward, declaring she would eliminate anyone who dared to harm him. Naturally, Luciel was skeptical, thinking women were often deceptive. He followed her into a grand hall, where she told him it was the Guild for Healers and he should register there. Approaching the reception, he began filling out the registration form. Suddenly, he looked up and sheepishly informed the receptionist that, due to his goldfish memory, he had forgotten the name of the village he came from. The receptionist chuckled and told him to write whatever he wanted. It didn't matter. After processing the form, she handed him a brand new ID. Luciel closed his eyes and focused on his card, which suddenly revealed his rank was G-class. She congratulated him on joining the guild, and Lumina decided to leave. But Luciel, casting aside his pride, begged her to stay. He lamented how he knew nothing about magic. With no formal training, she looked down on him, but then she offered 3 choices. First, to train like a maniac every day. Second, to follow the American capitalist path, borrow money for school, and spend a lifetime paying off debts. Or third, to become an intern, which was, let's be honest, a legalized form of slavery. He decided to commit to rigorous training. Lumina urged him to stay in the guild and train for 10 days, after which they would reassess him. The receptionist, named Kururu, showed him to a small room, which was still bigger than the average $2 million a month rental. Spotting a magic book by his bed, he eagerly jumped onto the bed, ready to absorb knowledge, but his attempts looked like a child trying to read a manga. He decided to try casting spells, but found himself too weak to manage any. Frustrated, he continued to chant spells until his mana ran dry, more depleted than Africa's water supply. Eventually, he realized his shortcomings and buried his face in the bed, crying. The next morning, he resolved to continue training. Instead of chanting spells like before, he opted for meditation. After watching a motivational video, his stats began to rise. Suddenly, a cute girl entered his room with some food, introducing herself as Monica. Grateful for the delicious meal, he attempted to cast a spell again with a stomach full like a bloated uncle, and this time he succeeded. He rushed downstairs to share his triumph with Monica, but she demanded a payment of a coin for having to look at his ugly face twice a day. He handed the coin over, only for her to introduce herself as Lumina's personal assistant. Hearing that, she turned pale and returned the coin, saying everyone feared Lumina, and she had a hidden weapon tucked in her pants. He thought to himself, what a twist of fate. I also have a sword hidden away, but he knew he had to focus on mastering magic and earning money first. But then she shocked everyone by introducing herself as Lumina's personal escort. Hearing that, Luciel's face turned pale as he pushed Dongshu away, whispering that everyone fears Lumina. Luciel hid his sword in his pants, thinking, what a twist of fate, because he also had a sword hidden there. Yet he decided to focus first on mastering magic healing and earning some money. Along the way he encountered 3 adventurers, and their story began. Suddenly, another group of rugged, battle-worn adventurers showed up. Their leader, named B, rushed over to check on his comrades. Luciel suddenly recalled Monica's words that this world was much like Earth. People would rather suffer at home than sell their homes to pay for treatment. Feeling out of place and determined, Luciel vowed to change this unjust world. He stepped forward to offer help. He led the adventurers to a back alley and began his business. Back then, he worked here too, but in a different role. He tried to pass on his healing essence to a girl, but faltered at the last moment. Still, Luciel remained resolute, trying again. This time, he succeeded in transferring his healing power and mending her wounds. He repeated this for several other adventurers, until only one young man was left. But before he could heal the final wound, Luciel's mana was completely drained, and he collapsed in exhaustion. That night, overwhelmed by his own weakness, he resolved to train harder and boost his mana reserves. The next day, he visited the Adventurers Guild and met the #1 waifu of this series, Nana. She told him bluntly that he had no combat skills and couldn't become a true adventurer yet. Luciel begged her to find him a teacher to learn how to fight. After a moment's thought, she returned with a tall, muscular young man looking exactly like those guys from Luciel's old world. I like effeminate guys like Luciel, he joked, agreeing to teach him on one condition. Luciel had to accompany him to the restroom every day. In the end, Luciel couldn't quite walk the righteous path in this other world, but he happily returned to his room to rest. Monica came back with some food, and while eating, she promised that if Luciel could reach level 5, she would help him with his personal affairs. That lit a fire under Luciel, pushing him to train harder than ever over the next week. Finally, he felt ready for the training session with the muscular mentor. Thanking Kururu, he left and headed to the Adventurers Guild. A blonde girl directed him to an underground basementa place where many titans entered but never returned. Undeterred, Luciel plunged inside and found a massive training room. His mentor was already waiting. Introducing himself as Bron, he told Luciel to start warming up by running laps. Though utterly drained, Luciel recalled how pitiful his past life had been shot and left to lie down, never rising to fight solo like in the movies. Determined to cherish this second chance, Luciel pushed himself to run until he collapsed. Bron realized this young man's past life probably involved nothing but anime marathons and zero romantic experience. So, he pushed Luciel harder and urged him to stretch properly. Then Bron told Luciel to try kicking him. Luciel's kick was weaker than a girl jumping rope, and Bron easily caught his slender leg. "Give it all you've got," Bron commanded. Luciel tried to throw a punch but missed, too slow. Then Bron launched a punch and kick combo, both dodged easily by Luciel. Bron smacked Luciel playfully, sending him into forgetfulness. But Luciel stood up again, leaping to deliver a slow, determined punch. Bron moved swiftly, but Luciel dodged just in time, forcing Bron to throw another punch direct and fierce. Luciel tried a final kick to regain ground, yet Bron effortlessly blocked and sent him sprawling to the ground. Bron warned Luciel that daily training was essential. Otherwise, facing any real monster would mean a painful death. Now, Luciel decided to heal his wounds himself, but Bron stopped him, urging him not to be careless. He told him to let his body's natural healing take its course to conserve mana for when it truly mattered. Suddenly, a group of adventurers appeared, led by a provocatively dressed woman. Luciel dashed toward her shapely thighs and asked if she was hurt there. She decided to reveal the claw marks left by a monster. Luciel stared intently, imagined a bit, then snapped back to reality and began healing her completely. This caught her by surprise, and her teammates eagerly wanted to experience Luciel's healing touch. After satisfying all the customers, Bron stepped forward, telling Luciel to practice healing magic daily until utterly exhausted, then meditate to replenish his mana. Luciel promised to train hard, but Bron asked, "Training alone won't get you strength to earn a living." Bron offered him a place in the guild with steady meals if he endured 3 spankings a day. Luciel was amazed at Bron's stamina, but, being used to this harsh trade, agreed without hesitation. That evening, as Luciel took a bath, Bron openly watched him. Then Bron handed him a set of clothes and turned away. Luciel put them on and sniffed disdainfully at his own clothes, worn and stinky from days of neglect. But Nana caught him red-handed and said she'd wash them later. Later, at the tavern, Bron sat with a pile of food, telling Luciel to eat as much as possible, noting that the meat had a bit of fat. Lucille ate like there was no tomorrow, then returned to his room. After receiving his 3 spankings, Bron coldly left and told Lucille that tomorrow's training would be even tougher and that he should rest well. Lucille wanted to sleep but was too excited, so he stretched, practiced spell chanting, meditated briefly, then finally collapsed into deep sleep. The next morning, Bron woke him and took him to the tavern. Lucille received breakfast from a chubby young man named Minhu, put down a large, foul-smelling jug, and told Lucille to drink it. Despite protests about the terrible taste, Lucille shut his eyes and gulped it all down. Suddenly, his entire body surged with energy, and he began eating like a raging bull. Afterwards, he headed to the training room to practice again, but quickly ran out of punches and took a solid hit to the stomach, collapsing hard. Thankfully, the foul-smelling drink from earlier had replenished his strength, allowing him to recover. "What is this? My throat can barely handle it," Lucille thought as he closed his eyes and gulped it down. Suddenly, he felt a rush of energy coursing through his veins, igniting his hunger like a bull on a rampage. Afterward, he rushed to the training room, eager to hone his skills once more. Yet, he quickly ran out of steam, taking a hard hit to the stomach, collapsing to the ground. Thankfully, the foul-smelling drink from earlier had fueled him, allowing him to rise again, ready to face Bron. He unleashed a flurry of punches, but Lucille could only defend himself. In the end, Bron found an opening and landed a powerful blow that sent Lucille reeling. Thinking he was finished for the day, Lucille surprised him by standing up again, determined to keep fighting. Bron began to find Lucille intriguing, but before he could land another strike, a cat-eared girl barged into the training room. Someone asked Lucille if he healed others without charging much. Following instinct, Lucille followed the scent of a woman and asked her to show where she was hurt. A cat-eared girl turned, revealing a bite mark on her lower back. Lucille immediately cast a healing spell, restoring her fully. She turned back with tears welling and began to sob. Suddenly, an adventurer questioned why Lucille healed demi-humans when society discriminated against them. Lucille cleverly replied with textbook wisdom that racism was wrong and good citizens should not discriminate. The young man playfully asked if he could come for healing again, and Lucille nodded. The girl suddenly jumped on him, hugging him tightly. That moment marked Lucille's first real victory. That night, he returned to dinner, and the chubby youth reappeared with the foul jug, forcing Lucille to down it before bed. While walking the hallway, Lucille sensed many eyes secretly watching him. He returned to bed, recalling how he once stalked girls just like this, then drifted off to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, he told Bron and the chubby man about the stalkers from last night. It turned out everyone was watching to prevent him from running away. This embarrassed Lucille, but they explained that most adventurers were dirt poor and couldn't afford healers. So when injured, they had to lie helpless until they recovered enough to work again. Since Lucille arrived, they healed rapidly and could keep earning. Lucille promised not to leave for at least a month and warned anyone spying would get a holy water splash to the face. The following weeks flew by as he bonded with guild members he'd healed. Bron began training him to become a future Titan beast, though Lucille's skills were so bad even his grandma could outperform him. Finally, the month ended, and Lucille's contract expired. Bron congratulated him on completing basic training and asked what his plans were. Lucille confessed he had been arrested for tax evasion and owed the guild a hefty sum. Bron generously donated money to cover Lucille's guild taxes and sent him back to training. Lucille thanked Bron and returned to the healing guild to settle his debts, then headed back to the adventurers guild. Bron immediately dragged him to the basement for another round of 3 daily spankings. Later that evening, as Lucille sat eating, the chubby youth brought the foul-smelling jug again, forcing Lucille to gulp it down to push his training harder. The next morning, ready to train, Bron announced today's session wouldn't be in the hall but in the kitchen. He wanted Lucille to learn how to butcher animals for the vegetarians who were squeamish about the environment. Lucille was a bit surprised but followed Bron into the kitchen, where a young man named Ganba greeted him warmly. Ganba welcomed Lucille, ready to guide him through this unexpected lesson. The next morning, as Lucille prepared for training, Bron informed him that today's session wouldn't be in the usual hall but in the kitchen. He wanted Lucille to learn how to butcher animals for the sake of the environment, as they had to be mindful of their impact. Lucille was a bit taken aback but followed Bron into the kitchen, where he was greeted by a young man named Ganba. Ganba reassured him not to worry, as he would only demonstrate the technique first. In an instant, he pulled a pig out of a magical bag, probably a theft from Doraemon. Ganba began to butcher the pig while Lucille, panicking and clutching his head, had never imagined he'd have to put meat in his mouth like this. Ganba mentioned that they would use the meat to feed the people of the city, but the real reason Bron brought Lucille to the kitchen was different. He wanted Lucille to learn about the various monsters in the forest and their weaknesses so he could defend himself in the outside world. Lucille instantly panicked, claiming he couldn't fight monsters like this, but Gamba told him not to act like a spoiled noble. Every day, hundreds of adventurers had to go out and fight, and many never returned from the battlefield. To heal others, he must first learn to protect himself. Thus, it was time for Luciel to stop acting like a coward. Gamba pulled out a horned rabbit from his bag and told Luciel to butcher it. Luciel was completely shocked but decided to give it a try, and somehow he managed to complete the task. That night, as he sat at the table, the portly young man mentioned that his clothes were filthy and that he should go wash them. He stepped outside to start washing when suddenly Nana approached him, asking if he was all right while holding his hand for a moment. This made Luciel blush immediately. That evening, he tasted the rabbit stew and decided to give up vegetarianism. The next morning, as he walked through the hallway, he was stopped by Nana and two other girls wielding two large water balloons. They pulled him into the library and started waving a pile of books, instructing him to sit and read. Luciel picked a book from Nana, and the others left, and she began teaching him 84 different ways to impress girls. After that day, every day, Luciel would train to help Gamba in the kitchen and then study with Nana in the library. 6 months flew by, and like an average Instagram influencer, his muscles had become tightly bound in the clothes Nana had provided. They were suddenly stopped by two powerful blasts that toppled a massive wall. They were dragged into the library, where a pile of books was thrust at Luciel, ordering him to read. Luciel picked a book by Nana, and the others left. Nana began teaching him 84 different techniques favored by every class. From that day on, Luciel trained daily, helping Gamba in the kitchen and studying under Nana in the library. 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. Like a typical Instagram influencer, his muscles had outgrown his clothes. Nana said this guild didn't accept shabby, ragged clothes and took him shopping for proper attire. After a full day of shopping, they walked back to the guild. Suddenly, they heard a scream. Luciel dashed toward the voice. It was a woman's scream and found Monica lying in an alley, blood pooling around her. They carried her back to the guild and healed her wounds. Luciel asked Nana who was behind the attack. Nana said it was just a random robbery, but Monica woke up insisting she was attacked by a man sent by some healing guild. This confused Luciel, but Monica explained that a few days earlier, a friend of hers had been sold into slavery because she, with not enough money to pay the healers, Monica took to Facebook to hashtag the abolition of slavery. Those healers despised her for pretending to be innocent, so they decided to punish her. That night, Monica went to the tavern and asked Luciel how much she owed him for saving her life. Being a gentleman, Luciel said she just needed to give him one little favor, and she agreed. A few days later, the attacker was caught, but the young man refused to reveal who hired him, landing him in a prison island. Months passed, and suddenly Bron rushed into Luciel's room, urging him to follow because an injured adventurer needed urgent help. They dashed through narrow alleys as Bron explained. These adventurers had been attacked deep in the forest by a strange creature, leaving most gravely wounded. A few months flew by again, and he had grown a ridiculous ponytail. He also changed his clothes and informed Bron that it was time for him to go out into the world and gain more experience. Bron wanted to stop him, saying he would miss their training sessions, but Luciel insisted that those days were in the past and he had completely changed. He declared that he would strive to learn magic and become stronger, and then open a clinic to heal people for a small fee. Bron wished him sweet dreams, and Luciel finally left the Adventurers Guild to explore the outside world. He began walking towards the Healers Guild and met Kururu, asking her for a guild ID card. She took the card and went inside, but seemed extremely confused after checking Luciel's stats. She asked him what he had been up to for the past year. He told her about his daily training and the 2 mugs of foul-smelling liquid he drank every day, which had helped him become the man he was now. Kururu mentioned that he had advanced 5 levels from F to C, surpassing all the ranks in between. So he asked her how much a C-rank magic book would cost, and Kururu replied it would be 90 silver coins. Luciel rummaged through his pocket and pulled out only 3 coins. Just as he was about to return to his old profession, Best walked into the guild and slammed a huge bag of coins down in front of him, telling Luciel to return to the Adventurers Guild for another year, because he couldn't live without him. "I'll train in magic, grow stronger, and then open a clinic to heal people for a small fee," Luciel vowed. Bron wished him sweet dreams, and Luciel finally left the Adventurers Guild to explore the world beyond. He walked to the Healers Guild and met Kururu, asking her for a guild ID card. She took the card and entered, but soon looked horrified after checking his stats. "Just what the heck have you been doing all year?" she asked. Luciel recounted his daily training and chugging 2 foul-smelling potions every day to reach Kamau. That ordeal turned him into a beast. Kururu revealed he had been promoted 5 ranks from G to surpassing all intermediate levels. So Luciel asked how much a C-rank magic book costs, and Kururu said he needed 90 silver coins. Lucille searched his pockets and pulled out only 3 coins. Just as he was about to return to adventuring, Bess stormed into the guild, slammed down a massive bag of silver coins, and told Lucille to rejoin the Adventurers Guild for another year. He couldn't live without him. Bess promised to cover all living expenses and even give him a free room. Kururu asked why Bess was so attached, but Lucille still longed for the adventurer's life and agreed to return with him. Lucille settled back into his old room, now filled with magic books Bron had bought for him. Just then, Bron entered, and Lucille was about to protest, but Bron told him to get his butt down for dinner. When he stepped into the tavern, Lucille was stunned to see all the guild members throwing a party for him. He thanked everyone while the chubby young man handed him a foul-smelling potion. Everyone pinched their noses, but Lucille drank it all in one gulp. Left alone at a table, no one wanted to sit near the stinky youth except Baz and the gang Lucille had saved from death. Baz asked if Lucille liked being depended on, but he denied it, saying it was just part of the job. Baz explained that their team was made up of progressive thinkers supporting the rainbow movement. Lucille looked at their happy faces and remembered how scared he was the first time he met them, almost ready to run. But now, he was starting to love this world. Baz's gang invited Lucille out sometime. Baz's crew was the first place Lucille felt like he belonged, a family forged through struggle and acceptance. Their laughter echoed like a balm for his weary soul, and even the foul potion couldn't sour that newfound warmth. To watch a female streamer sometime, and Kuramen immediately agreed. The next morning, while training in the gym, Lucille overheard some voices. Suddenly, a shabby old fat man barged in. Nana tried to stop him, but the man instantly recognized Lucille and approached, asking if he was the healer. Lucille nodded. The man introduced himself as Boss. Lucille suddenly recalled. This old guy was the one who ordered the attack on Monica months ago. Boss commanded Lucille to leave the Adventurer Guild immediately because he wanted him to work in his clinic. But Lucille flatly refused. Boss flew into a rage, claiming Lucille must work at his clinic because ever since Lucille showed up in this town and began practicing healing magic, no patients had come to his clinic. Lucille asked the old man if any part of that was his responsibility, then boldly asserted his healing magic was top tier. Looking at Boss, all he did was swindle people, charging half a house for the smallest wound, and if the patient couldn't pay, he would sell them off to Laos. Boss exploded at these accusations and snapped, telling Lucille he was too young to understand anything. Lucille called him an old fool and walked off, but Boss decided to settle the matter himself and told his henchmen to take Lucille down. Luckily, Bron was there. He grabbed both thugs and asked the old man if he wanted to face him. Boss panicked and fled, followed by his crew. Lucille thanked Bron for stepping in. The two went upstairs, where Lucille was warned that many were watching him, and numerous thugs would try to kill him to claim Boss's bounty. To prevent that, Bron said from now on, Lucille would begin a new training regimen as grueling as working on a rubber plantation. Kuramen shivered at the thought, but before he could complain, Bron threw him flat to the ground. Lucille stood up again, trying to land a combo, but Bron dodged and countered with punches, kicks, and slammed him down repeatedly, finishing by strangling him. Still, Lucille refused to stay down. He rose again, battered and bruised. That night, Monica told him that everyone had started drawing inspiration from him, training harder to become stronger because they believed misfortune would strike anyone. But Lucille would be there to heal their wounds, and that gave him a spark of motivation. So the next day, he told Bron he wanted to train even harder. Bron told him to defend himself with magic. Without a word, Lucille dashed, but Bron slammed him down like a fish. Lucille got up trembling like a 70-year-old man, but Bron congratulated him for surviving, saying most adventurers would have died from that attack. He told Lucille they needed serious training and tossed him a sword. And so, their daily training began, words clashing, spells flying, each day a battle of will and strength, carving Lucille into a warrior who would not back down. Magic and weapons evolved side by side, as Lucille immersed himself daily in the arcane arts. His skills sharpened steadily, the quiet weeks passing without much ado. Then, one day, while Lucille and Bron shared a meal with the rotund youth, Nana appeared, clutching a letter. Handing it to Lucille, she sparked a flicker of confusion. Who would send a letter to a nobody like him? To his surprise, the letter came from none other than the Pope himself. Opening it, Lucille learned that the Pope had heard of him through some mysterious source. Seeing Lucille's talents wasted in a tiny town, the Pope offered him a chance to serve alongside the church in a completely different city. The letter declared his promotion and urged him to leave the Adventurers Guild. Lucille was stunned. Bron, ever quick to read the game, declared it all the handiwork of the fat boss. The old man wanted Lucille gone, but not as the Valenzo. He sent the letter to the church, hoping they'd promote Lucille. This meant Lucille had to leave town, and the adventurers would be left to face the boss's brutal clinic alone. Bron sighed and said they could do nothing else. The best path was for Lucille to train harder than ever, mastering combat with all his might. That evening, Lucille pushed himself to the brink, collapsing from exhaustion. Nearby, a little cat toyed with him out of boredom. Suddenly, the rotund youth approached, offering Lucille a foul-smelling potion to restore his energy. The cat backed away, repulsed by the stench, but Lucille downed it in one gulp, surprising the rotund youth. Later that night, the rotund youth confided in Bron downstairs. He'd been pushing his limits too hard, sculpting his muscles to prove he was improving daily. He said if he stayed longer as an adventurer, he might have reached S rank, but instead, he chose retirement after hitting that peak. He mentioned Lucille had been chugging the foul potion all along, though he wasn't sure if it worked. Bron chuckled, saying, even if it's gross, the stench seeps into your cells, keeping monsters at bay. Soon after, Ganba entered. Reporting his investigation confirmed the fat boss truly had sent the letter requesting Lucille's promotion. Bron worried for Lucille's safety, but Ganba reassured him he arranged caretakers to watch over Lucille. 6 months slipped by in a blink. Once again, Lucille had to bid farewell to the guild that had been his sanctuary. He entered the training room one last time, meeting Bron, who handed down wisdom on surviving in strange lands. Bron urged Lucille to leave the church immediately if danger arose. Lucille vowed to heed his advice. Together, they stepped out as the sun dipped below the horizon, walking into a graveyard where fallen adventurers lay. Sitting by the graves, Lucille confessed though he saved many lives, many others were lost because he wasn't strong enough. He feared if he left, no one would heal the adventurers, forcing them into the clutches of villains like the fat boss scammers stealing from the poor to enrich themselves. Turning to Bron, he asked him to start training new adventurers in basic survival skills. Lucille believed Bron could save many, as he himself was rescued by this unlikely mentor. He wanted Bron and Ganba to train rookies to fight monsters and survive the harsh world. With properly trained adventurers, injuries would decrease. This would disrupt the fat boss's clinic, forcing them to lower their fees to stay relevant. Bron smiled, promising to organize a basic training course. Then, with a sudden grin, he asked Lucille what he thought of Monica. Blushing, Lucille admitted she was cute, with legs that could set fires. Bron laughed, telling him to say his goodbyes to his pretend wives. To Lucille's shock, Monica and Nana stepped out from behind the tombstones, eavesdropping on their conversation. They blushed as Lucille thanked them for their support. Monica confessed Lucille had saved her life when she was near death, a debt she'd never forget. Lucille announced he must leave the guild to journey to another city, stirring tears among the sisters. He promised to return as soon as he could, offering words of comfort. The next morning, the entire guild gathered to send Lucille off. He promised Bron he'd never forget their wild battles both on the field and in bed. At the city gates, the guard informed him his carriage awaited. Lucille thanked every guild member who helped him through dark times, vowing to repay their kindness one day. Bron, the old boss, handed him a Doraemon-like magic bag, capable of holding countless items, along with a small pouch of money. Bron told Lucille the gift came from the whole guild. Lucille's eyes welled with tears. Soon he boarded the carriage, still wiping away tears as he arrived at the city's main gate. The guards announced his carriage was ready with a few companions inside. Lucille was puzzled, he hadn't expected company. Climbing aboard, he greeted them, surprised to see Bron's father and his entourage. A pang of sorrow struck him as he felt teased for looking like a delicate flower. Finally, Lucille settled in, ready to begin a new adventure. The adventurers soon reached the holy city. Bron asked if he intended to go straight to the church to assist the Pope, but Lucille replied he was out of the foul potion and needed to buy some urgently. So, they headed to the Adventurers Guild to stock up. Fearing locals might exploit him for being unfamiliar, Lucille asked Bron and the others to accompany him. Instead of the reception, Bron led Lucille straight to the cafeteria. He told the waitress to summon the guild leader, wanting to introduce Lucille to Bron's comrades. Soon, the guild leader arrived. Lucille introduced himself as a healer. Suddenly, everyone turned to him with disgust, but the guild leader, knowing Lucille was Bron's right-hand man, decided to support him. At the city's main gate, the guards announced that the carriage was ready, with a few individuals already inside. Lucille felt perplexed, not expecting anyone to accompany him. Nevertheless, he climbed aboard, surprised to see Baz and the young crew. He felt a slight sting in his heart, embarrassed by Baz's teasing about looking like a spoiled child. Finally, he settled in, ready to embark on their new adventure together as Lucille and the adventurers. Soon, they would reach the holy city. Baz asked if he intended to head straight to the cathedral to assist the Pope. However, Lucille admitted he was out of that foul drink and desperately needed to buy more to quench his cravings. Thus, he decided to visit the Adventurers Guild first, to stock up. Yet, concerned that the locals might take advantage of his unfamiliarity and raise prices, he requested Baz and the others to accompany him. Baz joined Luciel, but instead of going to the reception, he led Luciel directly to the canteen. He instructed the waitress to call the guild leader, as he wanted to introduce Luciel to the young man. Shortly after, the guild leader arrived, and Luciel introduced himself as a healer. Suddenly, everyone began to gaze at him with disgust. However, the guild leader, having heard about Luciel being Bronze Mistress, decided to support the young man. Luciel then ordered 3 barrels of the foul drink, insisting he couldn't sleep without it. The guild leader handed him a cup, and the guild gasped as he downed it in one gulp. Luciel stored the 3 barrels in his magic bag. The guild leader then asked if it was true that he treated most patients for only a single silver coin. Luciel replied that he only did that for those deserving of help. Afterward, he made his way to the cathedral, taken aback by its grand size. Baz and his friends bid farewell to Luciel, who shed tears like a spoiled child once more. After that, he approached the receptionists at the cathedral and informed them that he had been assigned there by the Pope and wished to speak with their manager. However, he wouldn't complain like the usual patrons. The receptionist called for a saint named Grand, who would oversee Luciel from this moment on. He instructed Luciel to follow him, and then opened a magical door. Next, a magical elevator appeared, and Grand explained to Luciel that this was the only way to enter and exit the cathedral to prevent intruders. However, Luciel felt it seemed more like a way to keep the faithful from escaping. They quickly arrived at their destination, and Luciel spotted Knight Luminatha, the very first person who had helped him in this new world. Meeting her filled Luciel with genuine joy, and he was even happier to learn she remembered him too. She invited him to her room to watch some Netflix in the evening, and Luciel asked Grand about it. Grand explained that Lumina was the captain of the Van Kiri regiment, so she could do whatever she wished. After Lumina left, Grand led Luciel to a room where the boys were kept, along with an interrogation chamber. Grand handed Luciel a letter from the boss, accusing him of sabotaging other therapists' businesses in the city and demanding he recount his story. Now fully aware of the situation, Luciel seized the moment to reveal the truth to Grand. The boss and other therapists were charging outrageously high fees. That's why Luciel provided affordable medical services to everyone, keeping everything transparent. This didn't sit well with the boss. Understanding Luciel's side, Grand promised to discuss the matter with higher-ups. While waiting, Grand presented Luciel with a letter appointing him as a member of the cathedral's spiritual cleansing unit. He was assigned the role of assistant saint and purification master. Luciel felt confused about his new duties, but Grand reassured him that starting tomorrow, he would begin purifying ghosts and zombies. His salary? 2 gold coins a month, enough to buy Netflix for his entire family lineage and then some. Later, Luciel visited Lumina's room and shared his story. He told her about his new job cleansing souls, and Lumina thought the task was a bit much for someone like him. She informed him that the place he'd be sent to was an old underground graveyard turned dungeon. Luciel already knew what a dungeon was from his lessons with Nanate was, where magic mixed with the emotions of the dead to create treasures and monsters. Lumina was impressed by his knowledge, especially since she liked bookish, slender guys. Then Luciel asked if the job had any perks. Lumina told him that anything he found in the dungeon, be it treasure or monster wood, belonged to him. He could sell monster cores to buy expensive skill books. Luciel's excitement soared. But the job had its downsides too. The dungeon's fluid smelled worse than fermented fish sauce. Still, having grown up with stinky water all the way from Samao, Luciel wasn't fazed at all. The next morning, Luciel met with Grand and another saint named George. Grand gifted him a special cloak woven from holy threads and a badge marking him as an A-rank therapist. The cloak would repel bad luck and even attract girls, which Luciel found pretty awesome. He also received a card to use the magical elevator even when Grand wasn't around. However, Grand laid down several conditions, warning Luciel not to. Note: the original segment ends abruptly here, so the rewrite stops accordingly. Luciel swore he would never bring a girl into the sacred hall, vowing to keep his promise under the holy light. Suddenly, the talisman in his hand began to glow. Grand warned him that if he broke his oath, the talisman would lose its power, and a severe punishment would follow. That night, Jor led Luciel into the dungeon, where Kura men could smell the stench of rotting flesh. No sooner had they entered than they encountered their first zombie. Without hesitation, Jor sent it back to the afterlife with a swift purifying spell, then picked up a mana stone the zombie had dropped. Recently, Luciel had been studying holy magic too, capable of cleansing nearly anything from evil spirits to demonic souls. Jor entrusted Luciel to continue the work, as he advanced forward, sword in hand. Suddenly, he was ambushed by a horde of zombies. but Lucille's heart raced as he purged them all to the heavens with his cleansing spell. In moments, the holy magic shattered every zombie in the area. Luciel thought that defeating these monsters would surely boost his level, but alas, he was still a lowly level 1 Kura. Well, at least he earned 20 gold coins per victory, enough to train and hunt zombies simultaneously. Holy magic drained his mana fast, so Luciel devised a clever plan. He enchanted his sword with a purifying spell to effortlessly slay zombies. Compared to his father Bronze's grueling training, this felt like a breeze. For fun, he even experimented with healing magic, discovering it could also vanquish zombies. Luciel quickly cleared the first dungeon floor and moved up to the second. At the entrance, he dodged a zombie horde and spotted a wandering spirit floating in the air. It, too, fell easily to his blade. Suddenly, his stomach growled loudly, so Luciel decided to take a lunch break, eating bread and sipping a foul-smelling drink so rancid even the shambling corpses avoided him. After a smooth run through the second floor, he ascended to the third. There, a pack of skeletal monsters awaited. Just seeing them made Kura men wet his pants, but Luciel wasted no time, blasting them all to smithereens with holy magic. However, this drained his mana completely, so he decided he'd had enough dungeon crawling for one day. Returning to the gate, Jor was waiting, using a cleansing spell to banish the horrid stench clinging to Kura men. Seeing his superior so carefree, combined with his stagnant level despite countless kills, made Luciel suspect this dungeon was merely a simulated training ground for rookie paladins. Jor then led him to a shop where Luciel could exchange the mana stones collected from monsters for weapons and spellbooks. Calling the shopkeeper over, Jor asked how Luciel's first day went. Luciel put on a clueless face and admitted it wasn't too bad. The clerk told him to hand over the mana stones, which were worth over 4,000 points, a hefty sum for a newbie. She asked if he wanted to buy anything, but since she didn't sell used clothes, Luciel chose some spellbooks. He grumbled about the price being steep, even with his earnings. Next, he eyed a silver weapon, holy silver, to be precise. These weapons were truly effective against magical beasts, but only exorcists were allowed to buy them. Most people didn't know how to wield them, so they sold for surprisingly low prices. Feeling lucky, Luciel promised that with more points, he'd buy a sword and a spear tomorrow. The shopkeeper sympathized and offered both for 4,000 points to welcome newcomers. Delighted, Luciel returned to his room, humming a Taylor Swift tune, only to jump in surprise when Gran appeared in the hallway. Gran just wanted to check on his training progress and, seeing Luciel unfazed, handed him the paladin's uniform guide followed by additional instructions. The next day, Luciel entered the dungeon, wielding 2 weapons. He knew if Bronze saw his flashy antics, he'd probably impale him with a sword, but Luciel didn't care. He continued exploring the dungeon, collecting loot from defeated zombies. By the time he reached the 5th floor, he'd earned over 5,000 points. But Jor began to worry about Luciel's mental and physical health. It was already day 3 of this grind. On the 6th floor, Luciel casually dispatched stronger zombie variants and fire spirits before they could strike. Yet just as confidence swelled, reality Hyther stepped on a magical triple arrow trap, narrowly avoiding injury. As he took notes, a horde of zombies closed in. Luciel unleashed holy magic to obliterate them. In the days that followed, he grew cautious, constantly wary of traps. The zombie numbers increased, but so did his points, though his level stubbornly remained at 1. On day 10, Luciel reached the dungeon's 10th floor, defeating 20 zombies with a single holy spell and boldly moving toward the 11th. There, he found the boss's chamber but hesitated, fearing he wasn't ready for the fight. Sharing this with George, he was stunned to learn Kura men had amassed more points than Luciel, points harder to find than his girlfriend's G-spot. The next day, Luciel faced the boss room with high spirits, even purchasing a cheap bow for battle. Before entering, he gulped a large sip of foul energy drink for a quick boost. Pushing open the heavy door, it suddenly slammed shut behind him. A small spirit hovered before Luciel, but instead of attacking, it circled the room, revealing a giant monster lurking in wait. His heart pounded fiercely, yet he steadied himself and began chanting a purifying spell. But the dungeon played, its cruel game magic was nullified inside the boss chamber. Panic surged as Luciel fled, realizing he should have gathered intel before this encounter. Leaning against a pillar, he was clawed by a zombie for the first time. The true danger of the dungeon hit him hard. He fought back, slaying zombies one by one, discovering he could enchant weapons with holy magic and use this to his advantage in combat. He even purchased a sturdy bow to fight the boss and other monsters lurking in the room before entering the dungeon. He downed a large cup of the foul drink for an instant energy boost and pushed open the thick, heavy door. As he surveyed the room, the door suddenly slammed shut behind him. Luciel spotted a small spirit before him, but instead of attacking, It floated around the room, revealing a horde of monsters hiding within. A colossal creature awaited him, his heart pounding wildly. Yet, he steadied himself and began to chant a purification spell. However, the dungeon played a cruel trick on him, as magic was nullified within the boss room. Luciel, overwhelmed by panic, fled, realizing he should have gathered more information before entering. Leaning against a pillar, a zombie clawed at him. This was the first time Luciel truly felt the danger of the dungeon. He fought against the horde of zombies, taking them down one by one. In that moment, he discovered he could enchant his weapons with holy magic, using it to combat the monsters. After a grueling battle, he finally defeated the last of them, but exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Memories of Bronn and their nighttime skirmishes ignited a fire within him, motivating him to face the accursed dungeon head-on. As he scavenged for mana, a sudden whirlwind of darkness struck him down. Luciel looked up to see a skeletal figure cloaked in the garb of a saint. He realized that the battle he had just fought was merely a prelude. The true boss stood before him. He struggled to heal his wounds to fight back, yet his magic remained ineffective. In frustration, Luciel hurled his spear at the skeletal boss, but it dodged effortlessly. Next, he drew his bow, but his arrows failed to pierce the boss. Still, this confirmed his intuition. The boss feared weapons made of holy silver. Recalling that healers often struggled to use magic while wielding weapons due to their low skill, he decided to turn this to his advantage. Luciel planned to wait for the boss to cast magic on him, ready to strike back. Deciding to turn this weakness into strength, Luciel planned to wait for the boss to unleash magic on him, then finish it off. Suddenly, the boss released a dark aura, and Luciel fired arrows relentlessly. The boss dodged everything, but when it tried to cast magic, Luciel struck it easily. Seizing the moment, Luciel enchanted his sword with holy magic and attacked, though his blows alone couldn't fell the boss. The creature healed instantly, but Luciel had anticipated this. He pierced the bone boss with his spear, then swung his sword to shatter its skull, hoping this would finally end the nightmare. The boss crumbled, leaving behind spoils and a staff. Now, Luciel could use magic to heal his wounds. Gathering the loot, he prepared to leave when the door behind him suddenly opened. Eyeing the staircase leading down, he decided to explore the next floor tomorrow, his stomach growling too loudly now. Later, at the shop, he told Keth he was exhausted from today's battle. He showed her the magical stones he collected. Surprised, Luciel admitted he defeated the monster horde and the boss on floor M. Keth scolded him for recklessly rushing ahead, but when Luciel said no one explained anything, she realized it wasn't his fault, was simply clueless by nature. She exchanged his magic stones for points, and Luciel was stunned to discover he'd earned over 100,000 points today. Next, he displayed the boss's loot to Keth. She gasped upon seeing the necklace on the cloak. She ordered Luciel to stash it safely and follow her. With a determined nod, Luciel obeyed as Keth led him straight to the Pope's office. Luciel couldn't believe Keth was so important, she didn't even need an appointment. They bowed before the Popea, mysterious woman hidden behind a veil. Luciel thought everyone was acting, because a woman couldn't possibly be the Pope. Keth explained Luciel's feat, a novice exorcist defeating the floor 10 boss. The Pope believed her. She asked Luciel's name and instructed him to place the boss's loot on a tray. Examining the cloak and staff, the Pope confirmed they belonged to a high-ranking holy knight who vanished in the dungeon 12 years ago. She explained the necklace reduces mana consumption, while the staff nullifies magic from those nearby. Luciel was stunned to realize he'd found such legendary artifacts. The Pope expressed interest in buying them. Luciel looked at Keth, whose gaze said plainly, if he hesitated, she'd behead him and use his head as a chair. With no reason to refuse, he agreed to sell the items, but not without making his own demands. He confessed that his Doraemon-like bag wasn't big enough to hold all the spoils from his adventures, so he asked her for a larger one. The Pope kindly handed over a magical bagone that could hold as much as the very room they were standing in. Then, the Pope encouraged Luciel to keep up the good work and to keep coming back if he found any cooler toys. With that, they left the room, their pact sealed. Luciel realized that bargaining with the Pope wasn't a game for mere side characters like himself, fearing the thought of taking a dozen hits to the head. The next day, Luciel compiled a list of every mistake he made, battling the boss, a list longer than all his red flags combined. He wondered if there was still room left to train or if he was doomed to fail. Then, he went off for breakfast. On his way, he ran into Lumina, who had already heard of his dungeon exploits. But Luciel didn't feel proud. He told her he wasn't satisfied with what he'd accomplished. Lumina invited him to breakfast with the Ladies' Guild for a proper chat, and Luciel, ever the reluctant hero, agreed. However, he soon absorbed the harsh truth. Women are ruthless creatures one moment, berating him for being dumb, the next for being reckless and overconfident. He was called ugly, foolish, and blamed for charging headfirst into boss fights with delusions of grandeur. Luciel fell under the weight of their verbal barrage, earning a good 100 points of emotional damage. He pleaded for mercy, joking that he liked some S&M, but not this kind. Though he longed to return to training with Bronn, he was forbidden. Lumina assured him it was fine. If he wanted a brawl, the ladies would gladly throw down with him any time. So, Luciel plunged back into the dungeon, breezing through floor 11, bored out of his mind. Then he dropped by Kay's shop, where she handed him the magical bag gifted by the Pope. She asked him to infuse it with magic, and instantly it glowed a deep blue, revealing the bag's gender as male. She explained that anything could be placed inside simply by touching and chanting a spell, and retrieved just by imagining it. He could even see everything inside the bag. Luciel discovered countless spellbooks inside, gifts from the Pope himself. With the Pope's blessing, Luciel quickly unlocked floor 15 of the dungeon. The next day, under Lumina's guidance, he joined the V Regiment's training. He quickly blended in, being a bit of a softie himself. He introduced himself and joked to Lumina that, no matter how skilled the Ladies' Guild was, a real man still struggled when facing women in battle. Lumina, overhearing, found this unbearable and reported it to Kay, who promised Luciel he'd soon learn his lesson. Lumina then took off running, the ladies trailing behind her like a fierce pack. Luciel thought it'd be easy after all. He'd run plenty during training with Bronn, but he quickly realized this guild was next level. They outpaced him easily, shattering his fragile male pride. Humiliated, he wanted to vanish underground. After the run came sparring, and Lumina challenged Luciel herself. She scoffed when he wielded a spear and a cleansing sword, daring him to bring his real weapons to fight her. Switching to sword and shield, Luciel pressed the attack, but Lumina effortlessly dodged every strike, then knocked the wind out of him with a single punch. Gasping for air, Luciel recalled Bronn's lessons about luring opponents show the light from his sword could blind foes. He seized the moment to strike, only to realize he'd missed. Lumina was already behind him, delivering a light chop to his neck that sent him into unconsciousness. The Ladies' Guild revived Luciel a few minutes later, and he was relieved to hear the training was over. They admitted surprise at how seriously Lumina had fought him. They believed her respect for his effort was why she'd knocked him out. His training with the guild continued, and Luciel began to prove his worth in sparring matches. The guild noticed that any team with Luciel had the upper hand, thanks to his ability to cast barriers with magic. Lumina agreed, calling Luciel an anomaly mastering both healing magic and holy arts from a young age. She likened him to a wild beast, unpredictable and strange. Luciel wasn't sure if that was praise or an insult. Lumina revealed she had heard all about his rigorous training in the Adventurers Guild and his past exploits. Luciel was shocked she knew more about him than his own Facebook page and begged her to stop spilling his secrets. The next day, Luciel entered the dungeon again. He faced 3 zombies, flashing his sword and shield. Thanks to the magic bag, he quickly dispatched the undead and noticed a brick protruding suspiciously. He suspected a trap, but confidently stepped on it, triggering an alarm and unleashing a horde of zombies. Luciel countered with holy magic and swordplay, clearing the room as he pressed deeper into the dungeon. He reached floor 20, sensing the boss inside was lethal if he wasn't careful. Deciding to retreat and gather intel first, Luciel returned to Kay's shop. She confessed she'd never set foot in the dungeon, herself making her a novice in this realm. The next day, Luciel returned to the boss floor to practice fighting the monsters. Later, he was awakened by Y, a knight under Lumina's command, who found Luciel's ugly face unbearable to see at dawn. Lumina ordered Luciel to prepare quickly, as they would be training dual-wielding techniques today. Luciel watched Y spar with another knight, both wielding 2 swords, but thought it too risky for him. Lumina pushed him into the arena, where he faced the girl Y had just trained with. She launched a flurry of attacks, but Luciel held his ground, planning to counter once he spotted an opening. Before he could strike back, the girl flipped, kicked him in the jaw, and knocked him out cold. Following that, Luciel fought Y himself and decided to attack, but she vanished from sight like an old ghost in his house. Suddenly, she appeared behind him and defeated him. Luciel surrendered and asked how she disappeared so seamlessly. She revealed her talent with water and fire magic, creating illusions with mist and flames. Luciel, naive as ever, had thought she truly vanished. After a few more days training with the Ladies' Guild, Luciel finally mustered the courage to challenge floor 20 once again. He pushed open the heavy door and saw zombies lined up as if waiting for him to play. Determined, honed by his recent training, he attacked confidently. Despite the pain, he braced himself for a counterattack, spotting an opening. but the girl somersaulted, striking him hard and rendering him unconscious. Moments later, Lucille faced Y, intent on attacking her. Yet, she vanished, as if she were a ghost, only to reappear behind him and defeat him. He surrendered, questioning how she had evaded him. She revealed her talents in water and fire magic, creating illusions with mist and flames. Lucille, still naive, believed she had truly vanished. After training with the Sisterhood for a few days, he finally gathered the courage to challenge the 20th floor of the dungeon. He pushed open the heavy door and found a throng of zombies waiting for him, eager for a rematch. With his newfound training alongside the sisters, he was determined to take them down safely. This time, the boss he defeated dropped several rare items, which he brought back to the Pope. She thanked him for retrieving them, revealing they once belonged to a high-ranking saint. Suddenly, nostalgia washed over her as she spoke, recalling that the Earth had only transformed into a dungeon about a century ago. The exact cause remained unknown. Before the dungeon's inception, the land was filled with splendid structures beyond the graveyard. Lucille was perplexed, as the Pope spoke as if she had witnessed it herself. She continued, explaining that they had made numerous efforts to seal the dungeon, preventing the monsters from attacking humans. Lucille inquired whether it was possible to permanently destroy a dungeon, to which the Pope affirmed that it could be done. She explained that if the dungeon's core was destroyed, it would vanish on its own. However, no one had reached the level required to achieve that, especially given the declining number of knights over the decades. The Pope answered with a rare certainty. She said that if the dungeon's core were shattered, the whole dungeon would vanish on its own, but no one had ever reached that level of power. On top of that, the number of knights had dwindled over the decades, leaving too few hands to clean up these dark places. That's why she wanted Lucille to keep exploring the dungeon. She then asked if Kuromen had any more requests. Without hesitation, he immediately asked for armor and weapons to fight off the hordes of zombies. The Pope agreed, even promising to promote him once he became a level 7 saint. That was more than Lucille had ever asked for, and Kuromen's excitement to dive back into the dungeon was palpable. Soon after, Lucille headed to the Adventurers Guild to stock up on some pungent potions. Everyone there eyed him with a mix of fear and suspicion. The guildmaster was surprised he needed so many bottles, but Lucille was unfazed, as long as Kuromen paid up. Then the guildmaster asked him to work as a healer, like he had done in his previous town. Lucille couldn't commit full-time because of his duties at the church, but promised to help whenever he had free time and declared he'd heal anyone for just 1 silver coin. The guildmaster immediately led him down to the basement, where all the injured were kept, but the moment those rude adventurers saw his healer's cloak, their faces soured. They called him a merciless capitalist, extorting the dying. But the guildmaster silenced them with stories of the legendary healer from another town, who charged only a single coin. The adventurers had only heard tales of Lucille before. No one believed such a beast could exist in real life. Soon they were chanting his name, begging Kuromen to heal their wounds. Lucille told the noisy crowd to pipe down a bit, declaring he wouldn't be a full-time healer for the youngsters. They'd have to rely on other clinics more. In the end, he set some conditions to treat patients. First, no visiting pricier clinics, and second, they must help him or others in the church if trouble arose. Then, with a sweeping wave of healing magic, he saved everyone in one go. Gratitude filled the room, and they convened to give Kuromen a nickname that sounded fiery. They finally dubbed him the Holy Sicko, a perfect blend of saint and patient. Lucille was horrified by the nickname, but the crowd started chanting it like a sacred hymn, and Kuromen was powerless to stop it. Afterward, Lucille visited the shopkeeper K.E., telling her he planned to set up camp inside the dungeon this time. She thought it was reckless, but he assured her he would only sleep outside, carrying food and weapons in his bag. He believed he could make a nest in the empty rooms left behind by bosses after clearing them out. K.E. had to give in to his determination, but warned him to survive and return no matter what within a week. This was no ordinary journey. It was a lone warrior's battle against the abyss, armed not just with steel but with an unbreakable spirit. And as Lucille prepared to descend, the question lingered, could one man's resolve truly seal fate itself? Lucille promised to do just that and left. He returned a few days later. His spirit soaring had achieved his goal a whole week early. Then, she told him that the items he requested from the Pope had finally arrived. Lucille received a magical sword, a magic shield, and a solid armor set worn by the knights. Additionally, he got a special pillow that promised restful sleep and refreshing awakenings. Soon after, Lucille headed to the Adventurers Guild to refill his foul-smelling water supply and send letters to his friends. He visited them many times, becoming good friends with all the adventurers there, including Aleda, a prominent young member of the guild. Aled taught Lucille the skill of physical enhancement, and Luciel was eager to show off his progress using this skill. But it turned out Luciel was still struggling. Eld remarked that this was unusual because Luciel's magic control was excellent, yet despite his strength, he remained stuck at level 1. Luciel explained it was because he hadn't killed a true monster yet, and he found the zombies in the dungeon faker than a family reunion. Just then, the guild attendant approached, asking him to heal all the wounded. Luciel unleashed a series of spells, helping everyone recover. Then he asked if anyone had news about Lumina and her group or his friends from the previous town. One adventurer told him Lumina's team was doing great on their missions, while another shared rumors that Bron was kidnapping naive new adventurers and locking them in his special training room. Meanwhile, the chubby young man was creating more and more bizarre, sickening potions, breaking records. But the most shocking news was that many receptionists at the adventurers' guilds in town were about to get married. Luciel was hit hard by this revelation back then. He hadn't dared to ask anyone out, and now they had chosen other men. Fear gripped him. None of the adventurers knew which receptionist would marry whom, and he hoped it wasn't Nana or Monica. He knelt, praying to the heavens they'd at least let him attend the weddings and quickly send off his youth. Finally, Luciel overcame the shock and returned to his dungeon exploring work. Now, empowered with his magical sword, he could unleash high-level spells to wipe out multiple bosses at once. He cleared the boss chamber on the 30th floor, gathering a treasure trove of loot. He handed the spoils to the guild attendant, who placed a hand on his chest and promised to take care of him, making Luciel's heart pound wildly. Then she handed him a card, and he saw he had earned over 400,000 points this time. She advised Luciel to stock up on mana potions they could save his life when he was exhausted. He agreed, confidently noting he could now beat the boss, thanks to a high-level skill called area-wide healing. Everyone was stunned to learn that such a powerful skill belonged to someone so young and green. They asked if he used rocket hour to generate more mana, but Luciel explained he didn't take shortcuts to grow stronger. Then he suddenly remembered he'd downed dozens of bottles of foul-smelling water every day during training. The guild attendant dragged him to the Pope's room, insisting he confess all these secret sins. First, the Pope praised Luciel for clearing the 30th dungeon floor on his own. Then, after hearing his confession about drinking weird potions for 2.5 years, Luciel pulled out a barrel of the stinky water to prove it wasn't some stimulant. But who dared get close enough to check? He quickly stashed it away and cast a spell to purify the smell. He revealed that Bron and the chubby youth had introduced this bat-like potion to him, claiming it would boost his power. The Pope seemed well-informed and explained. The potion's origin-sit was originally a rare pill created by a high-level sage, designed to awaken anyone's hidden talents. But since it was expensive and scarce, the sage switched to capitalism and made a cheaper version of foul-smelling drink that Luciel had been downing daily. Luciel admitted he'd been drinking 3 cups every day for 2.5 years to get stronger. Both women found this utterly disgusting. The Pope struggled to maintain composure but praised his courage. Then she asked what kinds of monsters Luciel had faced and what loot he'd gotten. Luciel recounted his battles and showed the treasures he'd earned from hunting bosses. Suddenly, the Pope's demeanor shifted. She declared those items belonged to an old friend of hers and ordered Luciel to leave immediately, promising to reward him later. The next morning, Luciel visited the guild attendant's shop, where she handed him a letter from the Pope detailing the effects of the foul-smelling potion. Luciel decided to read it in the dungeon as he left. She wished him luck and told him to come see her if he needed anything in the dungeon. Reading the document written by the sage who created the potion, Luciel discovered it affected 3 basic human desires: hunger, sleep, and desire for women. Whoever drank it would sacrifice one random desire to greatly boost their physical abilities. Luciel began to wonder which desire he'd lost the love to eat and sleep, so the only option left was the third. He finally understood why his younger brother kept chasing girls but never managed to say hello properly. Luciel now grasped why. The letter ended by wishing him luck in the future. Fearful the truth might be real, he vowed to escape his forever single fate at any cost and dashed out of the dungeon. Yet months passed without a reply from Monica or Nana. To push those thoughts away, Luciel plunged back into monster slaying, determined to conquer them and overcome his sorrow. A month later, after receiving this news, Luciel explored deeper dungeon floors and finally reached the boss chamber on the 40th floor. Hesitating to enter unprepared, he decided to visit the Adventurers Guild for some intel. Luciel realized the truth behind why his younger brother never had the courage to greet girls. She always chose the easiest path, eating and sleeping. Finally, Luciel understood why his brother kept failing with girls. Wishing himself luck, Luciel feared this might be his own reality too, proving his deepest fears true. Determined to break free from the chains of loneliness, he ran with all his might ready to leave the life of a forever bachelor behind. Emerging from the dungeon, months had slipped by, yet Lucille had heard nothing back from Monica. To silence the growing doubts gnawing at his mind, he plunged himself into slaying monsters, each strike a desperate attempt to drown his sorrow. A month later, news reached him. Lucy explored the dungeon's depths and finally arrived at the boss chamber on the 40th floor. Hesitation gripped him as he stepped in unprepared, but determination pushed him forward. Seeking information, Lucille headed to the Adventurers Guild. There, he spotted a homeless girl. Sympathy stirred within him, but he feared if she followed him, authorities, maybe even the FBI, would intervene. So, he decided to bring her inside the guild where he was welcomed by his two comrades, Nana and Monica. Lucille asked what they were doing there, but before they could answer, some adventurers grabbed him, rushing him off for treatment. Lucille healed the wounded, channeling his speedsun skill, then questioned Nana and Monica about the girl he found what had happened to her. Though tending to others, his mind drifted to Nana and Monica, fearing they came bearing news of an impending wedding. Tears welled in Kurumin's eyes as she healed every adventurer. Then the two girls urged him to hurry to the rat's nest with the girl he found. Nana and Monica volunteered to accompany him, and the guild leader joined for their safety. At the rat's nest, they discovered many injured and sick beasts refugees ambushed by bandits en route to the city. Lucille approached a man standing despite unconsciousness. As he used high-level healing, the whole area pulsed with magic. Suddenly, the man stabbed Hema, haunting echo from a past life slamming into Lucille's psyche like a bullet. Panic surged. Was death looming again? But with fierce will, Lucille restrained himself, drew his dagger, and swiftly healed both himself and those around him. The two girls steadied him. Lucille's heart raced, caught between past trauma and present duty, as he fought to protect those around him, each healing spell a lifeline thrown into a sea of despair. Once he was stable, Lucille told them not to blame the attacker, as the youth had acted entirely on instinct. He proceeded to heal and disinfect others in need. While drinking a potion to regain his mana, many from the Rat District approached him, begging for help. Being susceptible to psychological hypnosis, Lucille agreed to treat them all free of charge, offering healing to every soul. He even purified the filthy canal running through the district and lectured them on the importance of cleanliness. As night fell, Lucille finally found a moment of rest and took the two girls to a fancy restaurant. Nana confessed how worried she'd been when he got stabbed, and Lucille smiled, warmed by her concern. Then, curious, he asked what the girls were doing here and how the guild would operate if they weren't manning the front desk. They explained the guild would soon be very busy because the two receptionists were about to get married. Lucille froze at the news and asked who was tying the knot. They said it was the two receptionists no one really remembered by face or name. Surprised, he wondered why he hadn't heard about this, as it was clearly written in a letter. The girls said neither they nor Lucille had ever received those letters. Shocked, it was like someone just proved the earth was flat. Lucille asked the guild leader about this, who sheepishly admitted forgetting to send the letters due to recent heavy drinking. Lucille snapped at him, but then Als interrupted, asking which of the two girls was Lucille's girlfriend. He wanted to claim the other. Lucille panicked and, in confusion, friend-zoned them both. He said they were close friends of Anne, and without their emotional support, he couldn't have endured the foul-tasting potions or Bron's harsh training. Everyone was surprised to learn Lucille trained under an S-rank adventurer, though the mentor had retired. Lucille didn't care. He was used to it. He wanted to spend as much time as possible with the two girls while they were here, but the girls immediately dragged him off to heal the other wounded in the hall. Time flew like a dog running wild in the fields, and Lucille barely got a chance to do anything with the girls. They just kept healing those injured. The group held a small celebration, and finally, the two girls returned to their town. Afterwards, Lucille went back to the Adventurers Guild and found the youth who stabbed him, bowing in apology. Deeply moved, Lucille told him he bore no ill will, as such accidents were unavoidable with his grumpy face. Then, the youth revealed they weren't refugees but envoys from another nation, sent here to meet the Pope and seek help in establishing a clinic in their homeland. Thank you, Lucille, for saving them and keeping them alive to do that. While the two were bowing their heads, the girl from before came up and hugged Lucille. He quickly realized she couldn't speak. She had been mute since a childhood accident. Lucille gently patted her head, calling her a hero for saving everyone. Then, using a healing spell he had just begun learning, he hoped to restore her vitality. Soon after, he met Lumina and told her how eager he was to face the boss on the 40th floor. She asked if he wanted to spar with her to sharpen his skills, and he agreed. Armed with his sword and magical shield, he braved Lumina's relentless storm of attacks. Quickly adapting, he threw a dagger to catch her off guard. Lucille feared she might get angry, but instead, she was impressed by his unexpected move. They trained a bit longer until Lucille was utterly exhausted. Lumina praised his growth but warned him not to rush into the 40th floor boss fight, just yet still had room to improve. A month later, Luciel finally felt ready to enter the boss's chamber. Lumina handed him a letter as she headed off on a mission. The letter detailed the formidable opponent Luciel would face inside the boss room. True to her words, he encountered a colossal skeletal warrior, the former captain of the Grand Knight Order wielding a spear and greatsword. Luciel could only dodge its attacks. He cast holy magic on the skeleton, but it barely had any effect. A thrown dagger also caused little damage. The boss struck back, injuring him and cornering him fiercely. In a desperate move, Luciel pulled out 3 barrels of foul-smelling water. The stench forced the boss to recoil, giving Luciel precious space to strike in varied ways. Whenever injured, he retreated behind the barrels to heal even resting there. This cycle repeated for a week until his supplies ran dangerously low. Trapped, unable to leave without defeating the boss, he feared the dreaded game over message might appear at any moment. Luciel realized the dungeon was far more brutal than he'd imagined this time. Death was a real possibility. Determined, Luciel poured every ounce of strength into victory. The skeletal general blocked his strikes with its sword, then lunged with its spear. After a week of battle, Luciel memorized its attack patterns, spotted a weakness, and slashed through the boss's ribs, then delivered a crushing blow that severed its head. The boss finally fell, dropping only a spellbook. Relieved to head home, Luciel tried to open the exit door, but it wouldn't budge. Trapped, he pressed deeper into the dungeon, climbing to the 50th floor. Clinging a barrel of stinky water to himself to ward off monsters, he pressed on despite exhaustion and hunger. Along the way, he found treasure chests and easily reached the 50th floor boss room. Soon, his food supplies ran out. After finishing his last sandwich, Luciel wondered if he'd dry up and die inside this dungeon. Fear crept in. What if he became the dungeon boss after death? Resolute, he vowed to survive this trial at any cost. Summoning the spellbook from the 40th floor boss, he discovered it taught a spell called the Sanctuary Circular Holy Zone that purges dark magic and burns any demon daring to enter. With this new power, Luciel entered the boss room and found numerous angry spirits. Suddenly, the boss appeared, a towering zombie pope. Luciel acknowledged it as a worthy final boss and prepared to heal the entire area with a powerful spell. But before he could finish chanting, the boss struck him, barely missing a deadly punch that released ghostly shadows lunging at Luciel. The zombie pope stood before Luciel, a final boss worthy of legend. He resolved to strike with his area heal spell. But before his incantation was complete, the boss's fist smashed down. Shadows spilled from its grasp, rushing at Luciel. Quick as a flash, he summoned holy magic, fending off the ghosts. Yet, the zombie pope closed behind him, chanting a dark incantation. Sensing the moment was critical, Luciel conjured a sacred circle, a tiny sanctuary of light around him. When the zombie pope touched the circle, searing flames engulfed it, hurling the monster against the wall. Relief surged. His spell worked, but the strain drained his mana, leaving him near exhaustion. He gulped a mana potion as the zombie pope advanced again. Recognizing he couldn't defend forever with dwindling mana, Luciel gambled on a bold move to end the battle swiftly. He began chanting the full sacred circle spell. As the boss neared, Luciel slid the circle towards it, like playing a high-stakes poker hand. The circle enveloped the zombie pope, unleashing holy power. The boss screamed in agony, and Luciel wondered if victory was his. But the answer came crashing down. No. Even as its form disintegrated, the zombie pope advanced. Luciel retreated, drank mana, then suddenly collapsed. In those fleeting seconds before darkness, he saw a human face behind the monstera, a silent message lost on him before the boss vanished completely. Searching through his spoils, Luciel found a forbidden holy spellbook, destined for the pope, and a strange artifact glowing like a halo, which he tucked away. Suddenly, a radiant light burst behind him. Turning, he saw a glowing rectangle on the wall. Fear fled. Another twist awaited, yet a sweet scent drew him closer. Touching the light, his magic was pulled in along with his very essence. In moments, a magical door opened. Luciel descended the stairs, curiosity and dread entwined. At the dungeon's lowest level, a massive injured dragon lay sleeping. Fear gripped him. There was no way he wanted to fight this beast. Gathering his courage, he reasoned. If it was only a zombie, his sacred circle could finish it. Downing his mana potions, he approached the dragon. Luciel unleashed the sacred circle. The dragon howled in pain from the holy assault. After agonized roars, it collapsed, and Luciel toppled backward, questioning if he'd truly won. Drawing near, he discovered the dragon still alive, conscious. Its roar shook him to the core, but it did not attack. Instead, the dragon expressed awe, surprised a human's unexpected strike could hurt it. As a reward, the dragon offered all its treasure amassed over centuries. Luciel could hardly believe his luck. The dragon assured him it was no once the treasure was claimed, the dungeon would vanish. Sensing no malice, Luciel asked about the dungeon's purpose. The dragon revealed a great evil god imprisoned it, and fellow dragons in zones saturated with dark magic, this dungeon among them. It had long hoped for a hero's rescue, but none came until Luciel. The dragon rejoiced at his arrival, grateful to be freed from suffering, uninterested in the treasure's glitter. Promising protection, the dragon vowed to guard Luciel from harm. In that moment, a bond was forged not just of power, but of hope and salvation, lighting a path through the darkness ahead. Protecting Luciel will only make his path harder. The dragon warns that the battles ahead will be even more grueling. It hopes Luciel can save as many people as possible, and if dragons stand alongside him, all the better. As the dragon begins to dissolve, Luciel touches it, finding only a skeleton remains. He vows to make the dragon's wish a reality, and help as many as he can. Suddenly, he gains several titles blessings from the healing gods, Dragon's Guardian, and Dragon Slayer. Luciel carefully wraps the dragon's bones in his magic pouch and receives a mysterious staff and necklace. As he wonders what they might be, they start glowing, transporting him instantly to the dungeon's entrance. He dashes straight to Keth's shop, only to be mistaken for a rogue zombie by her, who hurls knives at him. Fortunately, Luciel defends himself just in time. Luciel reassures Keth that he's alive, and she rushes to embrace him, overwhelmed with relief. She had feared he was lost forever in the dungeon, perhaps a zombie who barely escaped. Luciel explains he faced obstacles inside, but now isn't the time to discuss them, there are more urgent matters at hand. Keth pulls Luciel out into the cathedral, where he finds his friends from the previous town alongside Bronn, the city's guild leader. Just like in countless training sessions, Bronn immediately clamps a firm grip on Luciel's neck, grinning with relief that he's still alive. Luciel quickly surrenders and asks why they arrived so early, but before anyone can answer, a crowd's cheers erupt. The president of Maiden has just declared free university tuition. Luciel wants to ask many questions, but his stomach growls louder than his curiosity. Turns out they came to the Adventurers Guild for a meal. Since Luciel vanished 6 months ago, townsfolk feared the cathedral had imprisoned him underground to suppress the market value of other healers. This sparked protests demanding the release of their ailing saint. Afterward, Luciel challenges Bronn to test his progress but keeps getting kicked mercilessly. The more brutal Bronn's attacks become, the more helpless the audience feels watching in horror. Later, Luciel thanks everyone for their concern and sees them off. Then Bronn speaks seriously, reminding Luciel that no matter how much he improves, he's still fragile and shouldn't take reckless risks. Luciel hands Bronn several letters, asking him to deliver them to Nana and Monica. He's frustrated about being turned into a mere messenger, but decides to make an exception this time. The two girls have been deeply worried about Luciel, and even planned to quit their jobs to come see him, but Luciel stopped them with earnest words, repaying them with what they were given. That was the least Luciel could do. Then, with tears glistening, he bid farewell to Bronn and the others before visiting the Pope to report his findings. The Pope's eyes shone with relief seeing him alive and well, revealing that he had sent Lumina and her team to rescue him. But they couldn't surpass the 3rd floor, choking on the stench that lingered. Then, Luciel began to share his story with them. He recounted his dungeon adventure, though he glossed over the most crucial parts, declaring he'd only reveal those to those he truly trusted, including the Pope, Keth, and Lumina. The other holy saints bristled with anger at this secrecy, but the Pope silenced them. Then, Luciel opened up to the women about the zombie Pope, the forbidden holy arts, and the most shocking revelation, the immortal holy dragon. Luciel revealed the dragon had told him the next hero wouldn't be born for another 40 years. Meanwhile, the monsters would only grow stronger as darkness enveloped the world. The Pope's face darkened with worry upon hearing this, forbidding Keth and Lumina from sharing this knowledge with anyone else. Then, Luciel asked why he was still trapped at level 1. The Pope told him to open his status window to check the details. Luciel said his stats had increased, but his level remained frozen. The Pope handed him a scroll filled with grim information about the foul liquid he'd been drinking, a poison that hindered the drinker's ability to level up. Luciel's heart sank as he faced a cruel choice, to grow stronger or to keep drinking that stinking water. 1 week later, the Pope held a grand ceremony honoring Luciel's conquest of the dungeon. She promoted him to an S-rank healer and a bishop-level holy saint. Above all, she granted him the rare authority to refuse any order except hers. Then, she called Luciel to the stage to address the crowd. His hands trembled. He hadn't spoken publicly since high school. Summoning every ounce of courage, Luciel began his speech about the church's waning power and reputation corroded by greedy and arrogant healers. He vowed to craft new policies to regulate treatment fees and save the world from a broken medical system, like that of America. He pledged to throw his whole soul into healing others and restoring the church's glory. That's where this episode ends. If you enjoyed this journey,